My name is Renee Castellano. I'm 33 years old, and I'm a lieutenant in the United States Coast Guard. On a Saturday afternoon in September, my husband texted me one line: "Come home early. My mom's got something planned for you." So I signed out of the station, buckled my 10-month-old son into his car seat, and drove 90 minutes inland because I believed my family was celebrating something. Instead, I walked into my own living room and found 26 of my husband's relatives standing in dead silence. Nobody smiled. Nobody looked at my son. My husband dropped a sheet of paper on the coffee table and announced, in front of everyone, that the baby on my hip wasn't his. My mother-in-law screamed at me to get out of her son's house, and before I could say a single word in my own defense, the front door behind me swung open on its own. That sheet of paper was the opening shot in a war my husband had spent months quietly assembling. What he never planned for was what I actually do for a living. I run logistics and audit chains of custody for the Coast Guard: pallets, manifests, transfer receipts, signatures that have to match or the whole system stops moving. Over the next 4 months, I built a paper trail that ended in a courtroom, with those same 26 relatives sitting in the gallery watching every word of it read into the record. Welcome back to Untold Secret Hub, where family drama unfolds slowly, patiently, and all the way to the end. If a story like this one has ever landed on your doorstep, drop a comment below and subscribe. Let me take you back to that doorway. Our street in Belhaven was packed solid, bumper to bumper, and I remember thinking my mother-in-law had really outdone herself with whatever this surprise was. I carried my son, Miles, on my hip, diaper bag over one shoulder, a box of cannoli from the bakery near the base in my free hand. The front door was unlocked. The living room was full, 26 people, and I could put a name to every single one of them. Aunts, cousins, my husband's uncle Sal, who cries at every funeral and every wedding equally. The neighbors from across the cul-de sac. Not one of them said hello. The room had that scraped, clean silence you find in an aircraft hangar right after the engines cut out. My husband, Dominic, stood in the middle of it like a man giving a property tour. My mother-in-law, Rosalind, stood at his shoulder with her Sunday mass face on. "What's going on?" I asked. Dominic lifted a folder off the mantel, slid out a single sheet, and slapped it down on the coffee table hard enough to rattle the coasters. "DNA results," he said. "This kid isn't mine." The words didn't land right away. I actually laughed. One short breath of a laugh. Because it was the single most absurd sentence I'd ever heard spoken in that house. Nobody laughed with me. Rosalind's voice came in high and trembling, the way it does when she's rehearsed something in front of a mirror. "You wore that uniform and you shamed this family. Get out of my son's house." She flung her whole arm toward the door, like she was directing traffic on a runway. 26 faces turned toward me at once. Miles grabbed a fistful of my jacket collar, and behind my back I heard the doorknob turn. The door opened, and Petty Officer Dana Ibarra stepped into that living room in civilian jeans, spine straight as duty day, holding a manila folder against her chest. She looked at the crowd. The crowd looked at her. "Am I early?" she said in a voice that could stop a convoy cold. She wasn't early. She was exactly on time, because 2 weeks before that afternoon, I'd asked her to meet me at the house at 4 o'clock. Why I asked her is its own story, and I'll get to it. It had to do with a bank account and a number that wouldn't sit still. What matters right now is what one outside witness does to a room like that. 26 people can talk each other into anything. 26 people plus one stranger suddenly remember what they actually know, which in this case was nothing at all. Sal stopped nodding. 2 cousins found something fascinating on the carpet. I set the cannoli box on the entry table, walked over, and picked up Dominic's sheet of paper while he watched me the way a salesman watches a customer read fine print. A lab name I'd never once heard of. A bold percentage, and near the bottom, one small detail that made me steadier instead of shakier. I didn't say what it was out loud. I folded the page once, set it back down, and looked at my husband. "Miles and I will be at my quarters," I said. "You can talk to my lawyer." Then I picked up the diaper bag, nodded to Dana, and walked out through the door she was still holding open. Behind me, Rosalind was still shouting about her son's house. That was the last time I ever walked out that door, believing any of it might simply blow over. You should know who exactly they picked this fight with. My father was a chief petty officer, 24 years in uniform, a man who could locate a replacement bilge pump in a hurricane if you gave him 20 minutes and a flashlight. When I was 15, someone under his command falsified a supply log, and the blame drifted quietly toward him. My father refused to fight it publicly. He took an early, unremarkable retirement, moved us back to his hometown, and spent his last 9 years being believed at the feed store. He had one sermon he delivered from the tailgate of his truck more times than I can count. "People talk," he'd say. "Paper doesn't lie to cover for you." He kept receipts for everything and showed them to almost nobody. I loved him, and I swore I would never die the way he did. Misjudged by a town too tired to check the file. Then I went and built his exact life, just with better posture. ROTC scholarship at 18. Commissioned at 22. 11 years moving freight and proof for the Coast Guard. I met Dominic Castellano at a cousin's wedding when I was 26. Third-generation contractor. The kind of easy charm that tilts a whole room toward him without him even trying. We married when I was 28. At 30, I bought the house in Belhaven. My VA loan, my $28,000 down payment, saved one deployment cycle at a time. Both our names went on the deed, because that's supposed to be what marriage means. Miles came when I was 32. Our arrangement was simple. Weekdays, he stayed with me in family housing near Sector Overlook, 8 minutes from the base Child Development Center. Weekends, we drove back to Belhaven and played house under his father's roof. I thought the commute was the hardest part of my marriage. The hardest part turned out to be living with a man who'd been quietly taking inventory of everything I had. That night, in my quarters, with Miles asleep against a rolled-up towel, I opened my laptop and did what I'd already been doing for 2 weeks. I watched the numbers. Here's the part I promised you. 16 days before the ambush, my banking app locked me out. I called the bank within the hour. A polite young man told me the recovery email on our joint accounts had been changed. Not by me. I changed every password I owned that same night, turned on transaction alerts, and rerouted my paycheck into an account carrying only my name. I also asked Dana to come with me to Belhaven on the 21st, because I intended to ask my husband one calm question about money, and I wanted a witness with a reliable memory. That was the meeting Dominic had scheduled his little ambush directly on top of. Now, with printouts spread across my kitchen table, I could finally see the entire shape of it. Our joint savings had held just over $44,000 back in April. It held $1,600 now. 9 transfers over 5 months, $42,400 in total, every single one routed to the same place. Castellano Contracting, operating account. He hadn't technically stolen it. His name sat right there on that account, same as mine, and when I'd asked the bank about closing joint savings, the answer was simple. Both signatures. Both. I could reroute my own paycheck, and I did. I couldn't lock a door we both still held keys to. So I sat there at midnight doing Chief's daughter math, and one date stopped me cold. The transfers had started in April. The DNA test surfaced in September. He wasn't a betrayed husband who'd stumbled onto proof. He was a man standing in a hole, building himself a story to climb out on my back. Monday morning, my commanding officer called me into his office before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. Commander Hal Osei is a fair man with a face like a filing cabinet, and he slid a printout across the desk without a word. An email sent Saturday night at 11:14 p.m. from an address made entirely of random letters. Subject line: Conduct of LT Castellano. Attached was a scan of Dominic's so-called DNA test, plus 3 paragraphs accusing me of infidelity, written by someone who typed the word integrity 5 separate times. Here's what civilians don't always understand. In the Coast Guard, an accusation like that isn't simply a sad story. It can trigger a formal review under conduct regulations. Something like that, arriving in writing with an exhibit attached, isn't something a commander can wave off. He has to look into it. Commander Osei was decent about the whole thing. He said the timing reeked of a divorce tactic, and then he said the word I already knew was coming. Inquiry, which meant a flag on my record. Which meant my packet for lieutenant commander, the one going before the board that winter, would sit in a drawer while strangers asked my colleagues questions about my marriage. I walked out of that office and stood in the parking lot a minute, watching the flag snap on its pole. My husband hadn't just aimed at my house. Before that Saturday night was even fully over, somebody had been sitting at a keyboard aiming at my career too. A divorce takes half of everything. This was engineered to take all of it. The house, my son, my rank, my name. I got in my truck and made 2 calls. The second one went to an admiral. Rear Admiral Caroline Voss commands the sector, and 9 years ago she'd commanded me on a joint task force in the Gulf, back when she was a captain with a habit of reading every single line of every manifest by hand. I once watched her refuse a pallet of premium supplies a contractor tried to gift the unit, on principle, in 105-degree heat. That's the kind of officer I asked for 10 minutes with. She gave me 15. She listened with both hands flat on her desk. When I finished, she didn't offer sympathy, because sympathy isn't what she deals in. "Here's what I can do, Lieutenant," she said. "Nothing. I can't put my thumb on the scale for you. What I can do is make absolutely sure nobody else puts theirs on it either. The inquiry runs by the book. No shortcuts, no whisper campaign, no career funeral before the facts arrive. You bring receipts. That's your lane. It's always been your lane." Then she picked up her phone and got me 30 minutes with Lieutenant Commander Priya Anand, a JAG attorney with a runner's build and a surgeon's patience. Anand looked at the scan of Dominic's test for about 90 seconds and nearly smiled. "This is a mail order result," she said, "at best. No verified identities, no chain of custody, no court in this state will treat it as proof of a single thing." She couldn't represent me in a civilian divorce. The service doesn't work that way. But she could translate the battlefield for me. Get a civilian family attorney today, answer the petition, and demand the court order a real test. The legal kind, where everyone shows ID and a neutral stranger seals the tubes. Make the paper fight fair, Anand said, and paper wins. I wrote that down. The petition arrived that Thursday, hand-delivered to the base gate like a dare. Dominic was filing for divorce, casting himself as the wounded party in his own screenplay. He wanted exclusive use of the Belhaven house. He wanted temporary custody of Miles, and his attorney had typed the reasons into a tidy little list. The mother resides in military housing. The mother is subject to underway rotations and deployment with limited notice. The mother's schedule is incompatible with a stable home. My schedule, the one that had Miles at the base child development center by 7:15 every morning, fed, dressed, and babbling at the fish tank. Behind the petition came a second envelope, the kind his lawyer probably called generous. If I signed over my interest in the house and waived any claim to the business accounts, Dominic would agree to keep the paternity matter private. Out of the parish, out of the neighborhood, and away from my chain of command. I read it twice to make sure it said exactly what I thought it said. Marion Delacroix, the family attorney I'd hired on Anand's recommendation, read it once. She's 54. Wears reading glasses on a beaded chain, and has the bedside manner of a wood chipper. "This isn't a divorce," she said. "This is a foreclosure with your wedding photos stapled to it. He manufactured a scandal, and now he's selling you the silence." She slid the envelope back across the table. "We're not buying. We're going to court. I want to pause here for just a breath. If anyone has ever handed you something quiet to sign just to keep the peace, tell me in the comments what you did. I read every one of them. And subscribe, because the next thing his family slammed down wasn't a folder. It was a court order." Delacroix spread Dominic's test across her conference table like a coroner starting a shift. "Walk me through what's wrong with this," she said, then answered herself, tapping the page with her pen. No collection site listed, no technician's signature, no case number format she'd ever seen from an accredited lab, nothing showing who swabbed whom, or when, or who was watching. "Real paternity evidence has a chain of custody," she said. "A neutral third party checks ID, collects the samples, seals them, ships them, and signs off at every single handoff. This thing," she flicked the corner of the page, "this is a fortune cookie with a percentage printed on it. The lab name across the top read Helix Origin Diagnostics. That afternoon I called the customer service number on the letterhead twice. The first time, it rang straight into a robotic voicemail that repeated the phone number back to me and hung up. The second time, same robot, same dead end. No hold music, no menu. No human being anywhere. No lab I've ever dealt with in 12 years of federal service runs its phones like that." Delacroix filed our response to the petition the next morning, and with it the motion that became the spine of everything that followed. A request that the court order genuine genetic testing. The legal kind. Both parties. Photo ID. Witnessed collection. Accredited laboratory. He built his entire case on one sheet of paper, Delacroix said, sliding the motion into her briefcase. So we're going to ask the court to make the paper real. Watch what he does when we do that. Innocent men welcome a better test. She was right about that, and I'll tell you exactly how his lawyer reacted when we get there. But first, the court took something from me. The temporary orders hearing lasted 35 minutes, which is a shockingly short amount of time to lose your weekdays with your own son. Dominic's attorney was a smooth operator named Fenwick, who used the phrase "the family homestead" the way realtors say charming. He painted the picture with a soft brush. The father, self-employed, works from the family residence. The grandmother, 3 blocks away, devoted. The mother, a respectful pause, resides in military quarters 90 minutes from the child's community, subject to field training and deployment without notice. He mentioned my upcoming 8-day sea rotation 3 separate times. He never once called me a bad mother, which is the cleverest possible way to say it. Delacroix pushed back with the childcare sign, in sheets, the pediatrician's notes from the base clinic, the simple fact that Miles had spent every weekday of his life with me. But temporary hearings run on shorthand, and the shorthand in that courtroom was a house with a yard versus a woman with orders. The judge kept the child's weekday routine in the Belhaven house. Miles with Dominic Monday through Friday, me on weekends, video calls in between. Status quo, he called it. It was nobody's status quo. It was brand new, and it handed my son's weekdays to the man who'd staged a tribunal in his own living room. Delacroix caught my arm in the hallway. "This is the round military mothers lose," she said. "I've watched it happen for 22 years. Deployment gets dressed up as instability, and the ink dries before the truth even shows up to the hearing. The final hearing is the real fight. Don't spend yourself here." I nodded, professional as a fence post. Then I sat in my truck in the parking garage, looked at the empty car seat in the rearview mirror, and let myself have exactly 5 minutes. The family went quiet around me the way a town goes quiet before a storm, all on some signal I never quite heard. Nina, Dominic's sister, the one who taught Miles to clap, sent me a text that read, "Please just sign whatever he sent. Don't drag the whole family through this. I'm begging you." Cousins unfollowed me in a neat little row. The deacon's wife, who'd hug me at Miles's christening, looked straight through me at the grocery store like I was a window with a bad view. Somebody, and I never did find out who, told the spouses group at the base that Renee Castellano had cheated on her husband, and that sentence traveled 90 miles faster than I ever drove them. My thumbs actually typed out the long message. You know the one. The one with the dates, the bank alerts, the whole explanation. 3 paragraphs of a chief's daughter begging a jury that had already voted. I sat on my bed in quarters at 1 in the morning and read it back, then deleted the entire thing. Because explaining yourself to people who helped build the stage is just applause aimed at the wrong side of the room. Dana watched me do it over takeout the next night and shook her head slowly. "You keep proving you can bleed quietly," she said. "One of these days, try winning loudly, just once." As a treat, I told her the court would do my talking for me. I half believed it. Then Wednesday, an envelope with no return address showed up at my quarters. Inside was a blank card, cream-colored, heavy cardstock. No message at all, just a name signed in slanted, old-fashioned handwriting at the bottom, Josephine, Dominic's grandmother, the only Castellano who hadn't been standing in that living room. While the family voted, I did logistics. The supposed bank records landed on Delacroix's desk in a box, and I spent an entire weekend turning that box into a binder with color-coded tabs, because that is, unapologetically, my love language. Red tabs: 9 transfers April through August, joint savings to Castellano Contracting Operating, totaling $42,400. Blue tabs: the childcare log from the base center, every weekday sign, in since Miles was 6 weeks old. My initials in the box morning and evening, hundreds of them. It's hard to call a woman an absent mother when her handwriting shows up twice a day for a year straight. And then the green tab, the one that made Delacroix push her glasses up into her hair. In May, someone had applied online for a home equity line of credit against the Belhaven house. $55,000, with my electronic signature on the application. I never signed it. The application had been submitted at 238 on a Tuesday afternoon from an IP address that resolved directly to the offices of Castellano Contracting. It had died quietly in underwriting for one simple reason. The fraud alerts I'd set up made the bank call my cell to verify, and I told them the truth. No, that wasn't me. Freeze it. At the time, I'd assumed it was identity thieves. Now I knew the thief's middle name. Delacroix stared at the green tab for a long minute. He needed money badly enough to forge your signature back in May, she said. Remember that, the next time you're tempted to think any part of this was about love, or doubt, or that little boy. This was a man drowning, looking around for something buoyant to stand on. That would be you. Miles spiked a fever on one of my weekends, tugging at his right ear and crying the ragged cry that rewires a mother's whole spine. I took him to urgent care in Belhaven, and when the nurse called us back, Rosalind was sitting in the waiting room with her purse on her knees. Dominic had texted her. Apparently she'd followed us in, and I let her, because Miles reached for her the moment he saw her. Whatever else is true in this story, that part was real. Rosalind hummed the little counting song while the doctor checked his ears. She knew the exact verse Miles likes, the one about the fireflies. She caught his little shoe when it slipped off and warmed it in her hands before slipping it back on. Air infection. Amoxicillin. Nothing frightening. In the parking lot, Rosalind stood beside my truck while I buckled the car seat, and for one strange minute, she talked to me like a woman instead of a verdict. You think I'm cruel, she said. I was 26 once in this same town, with people whispering things about my own husband. A woman is whatever this town decides to say she is. I learned that the hard way, and I made my peace with it. You'll learn it too. There was no meanness in her voice. That was the frightening part. She wasn't spitting venom at me. She was reciting the town's catechism, the one she'd spent her whole life paying to memorize, the one where the family story is a house, and every woman inside it is load-bearing. For 1 second I felt something for her that was almost tenderness. Then she straightened her coat and finished the lesson. Dominic would never lie about blood, she said, and walked to her car. I understood, finally, that the sermon had never actually been meant for me. In the first week of October, the court granted our motion, and Dominic's side lost its manners. Fenwick objected in writing and in person. Testing was redundant, invasive, an insult to a grieving father. Grieving, he actually said that word, about a man whose son was alive and cutting his first molar. Delacroix answered with one sentence I intend to have engraved somewhere someday. If Mr. Castellano trusts his own results, Your Honor, a better lab can only agree with him. The judge signed the order. Legal paternity testing. Both parties and the child. Government issued photo ID. Samples collected under observation at a certified facility. Chain of custody documented from swab to lab bench. A week later, the appointment card arrived in the mail plain as a jury summons. Collection, October 14, 9 a.m. Both parties. Photo ID required. I stuck it to the refrigerator in my quarters with a magnet, shaped like a little lighthouse. Dead center where I'd see it every single morning while Miles's oatmeal spun in the microwave. My father's voice climbed up out of some tailgate from years back. People talk. Paper doesn't lie for you. Next to the card I taped a photocopy of the Belhaven deed. And some nights, moving between the stove and the sink, I'd stop and look at the line where the owners were listed. Get out of my son's house, she'd screamed. His house. My name. Both of those things were on file somewhere, and only one of them was actually true. Here's the question I want you to sit with, because I sat with it for 2 straight weeks. If Dominic genuinely believed his own test, if the science was really on his side, why did his attorney fight this hard to keep a legitimate lab away from it? The command inquiry moved through my unit that same month, polite and heavy, like a piano being carried up a narrow staircase. My deputy got interviewed. My yeoman got interviewed. People I'd trained. People whose weddings I'd stood up in, sat across from an investigating officer, and answered questions about my marriage, then avoided my eyes at the coffee mess afterward, not from doubt, but from sheer embarrassment, which somehow lands even harder. My promotion packet was flagged, formally frozen, pending resolution. The command track I'd been quietly shortlisted for went from an actual conversation to total silence. And then Dominic's team filed a fresh exhibit in the divorce case. A sworn declaration from Rosalind Castellano, stating that at Easter dinner in her own kitchen, I had confessed to an affair with a man from the base. I read it standing up, Easter dinner in her kitchen. I'd been nursing a 4-month-old and basting a ham, while Rosalind told me exactly which pan I was ruining. The declaration didn't even sound like her. It read like a lawyer's idea of her. The phrase "the individual in question" appeared twice. Rosalind has never once in her life said the individual in question. She talks like a parish bulletin, not a deposition. And Anne went over it with me line by line and set it down gently. Perjury by dictation, she said. It reads drafted. These things tend to crack once the witness has to say it out loud, under oath, in a real room. Until then, discipline. The flag comes off when the truth goes in. I kept her words and Delacroix's warning in the same pocket. They didn't actually need to beat me in court. Not really. They needed me exhausted, broke, ashamed, and gone, before the truth ever finished lacing up its boots. Knowing that was its own kind of armor. Discovery is a beautiful word. It means the other side has to hand you things they'd honestly rather burn. Delacroix demanded the original digital file of the Helix origin report, not a scan, the actual PDF with its guts still intact, and sent it to a forensic document examiner named Walter Prine, a quiet man who has spent nearly 3 decades making paper testify. While we waited on Prine, I did my own kind of homework. The kind they issue you along with a supply clipboard. At the ambush, Dominic had waved around more than just the report. He'd shown his uncles the box, the swab kit he claimed to have secretly used on Miles, like a man producing the murder weapon. Delacroix's discovery demand covered that kit too. The physical box, produced for inspection, shipping label and all. A cardboard box has a shipping label. A shipping label has a tracking number. Delacroix subpoenaed the carrier's records for it, and one Tuesday morning in early October, the answer came back on a single page. The kit had been delivered to the Belhaven front porch on September 19th at 3:12 in the afternoon. I pulled out the so-called report and laid the 2 pages side by side on my kitchen table and looked at what time itself had to say about my husband. The report, results, percentage, letterhead, the whole works, was dated September 10th. The test existed 9 days before its own kit did. You can fake a letterhead. You can fake a signature and a customer service number and a lab that answers with a robot voice. But a delivery scan sits inside a carrier's database, time-stamped by machines that have no idea whatsoever who's married to whom. Paper can be printed. History can't. I slept 8 hours that night for the first time in a month. October 14th came in bright and completely ordinary. The collection office sat in a beige suit next to an orthodontist's, running on the sacred boredom of procedure, which by then I loved the way other people love cathedrals. A technician named Odessa checked my ID against her list, checked Miles's birth certificate, photographed us both, and gloved up. Dominic arrived 11 minutes late, sunglasses pushed up on his head, working the room out of habit. "Y'all make a guy feel like a celebrity," he told Odessa, flashing the property tour grin. Odessa did not look up. "Photo ID please," she said, and something in me sang one quiet, private note. She swabbed Miles's cheek while he sat on my lap, gnawing the ear of a stuffed elephant. She swabbed mine. She swabbed Dominic's. Each swab went into its own sleeve, sealed with evidence tape, initialed, logged, donor, time witness, while both of us watched every step. Chain of custody isn't just a phrase. It's a small ceremony, and every step of it says the exact same sentence. Nobody gets to be alone with the truth. That was the sentence Dominic's entire life had grown allergic to. On his way out, he passed close to my chair, bent down as if to say goodbye to Miles, and let his voice drop just under the hum of the air conditioner. "Doesn't matter what the tube says, Renee, everyone already believes me." Then he thanked Odessa loudly and left, trailing Cologne. I sat still and let it settle, because he wasn't entirely wrong. Belief is loud, and his family's belief carried 26 voices and a whole parish behind it. But while we waited on that sealed tube, Delacroix's phone rang about a PDF. "If you've stayed with me this long, subscribe and stick around, because the paper trail was about to catch fire." Then the service did what the service does. It sent me underway for 8 days. Weather, radio watches, and 300 sailors' worth of fuel and provisions to track. Exactly as Dominic's attorney had so mournfully predicted. Miles stayed in Belhaven under the temporary order. I got a video call window most evenings, 6 minutes of a pixelated toddler smearing applesauce while Rosalind's voice narrated from off screen, then a dropped signal and a long walk back through the passageways. I'm not going to dress it up for you. Those 8 days were the worst stretch of the whole ordeal, worse even than the living room, because the living room had only taken my dignity. On night 5, in a birthing compartment that smelled like diesel and old coffee, Dana and I split a care package brownie, and I told her the entire story of my father. The falsified log, the quiet retirement, the feed store. I'd never told anyone all of it before. Not even Dominic. Especially not Dominic. He kept boxes of receipts that proved him innocent, I said. We found them in the attic after the funeral, labeled by month. He could have cleared his name in a week. Dana was quiet for a while. So why didn't he? She finally asked. And I heard myself say the true thing out loud for the very first time, because he was proud. He decided that if the town needed proof, the town didn't deserve him, and it's what killed him, not the lie. The silence. Dana passed me the last of the brownie. And you, she said. I looked at the overhead for a long time. When we came back through the gate on day 8, 2 envelopes were waiting at my quarters. The lab and Prine. I opened the lab's envelope standing up, still in a dirty uniform with salt on my boots and Miles's elephant sitting on the counter. Probability of paternity 99.99%. Dominic Castellano was Miles's father, said the accredited laboratory, the witness swabs, the sealed tubes, the unbroken chain of signatures. I sat down on the kitchen floor of my quarters and cried for about 90 seconds, the ugly kind. Then I washed my face, because I know the difference between a battle and a war. I'd been right too. Here's what that number changed in Belhaven. Nothing. Delacroix formally served the results on Dominic's counsel that same week, and Dominic, I have to give the devil his due, had already moved. 2 days before the results landed, he'd called a family meeting at his mother's, wept at her kitchen table, and unveiled the new script. He was a victim too. That testing website had defrauded him. He'd swabbed his own son in good faith, paid his money, and been handed a lie that broke his heart. And now the lawyers said the real test proved Miles was his after all. And thank God. Thank God, he cried, Nina told me later. Actual tears on cue. That man should have gone into theater. And the chorus took it up in one breath. Poor Dominic, deceived by the internet. And notice how he never once stopped loving that little boy. Rosalind called Miles our miracle right there on the church steps. Nobody called me. Nobody apologized. The same 26 people who'd watched me get pointed out of my own front door simply revised the story and kept their seats. Everyone already believes me, he'd said. Belief just needed a fresh coat of paint. But the second envelope was still sitting on my counter. Prine's report ran 43 pages, and it didn't paint anything. Walter Prine had taken Dominic's PDF apart the way you'd strip down a rifle, and laid every piece out in order. Piece 1. The Helix origin report had been built from a template, a novelty paternity certificate sold online by a company whose own website says, in small gray letters, for entertainment purposes only, same fonts, same seal, same layout grid. Prine overlaid the two and they matched like a fingerprint. Piece 2. The file's own metadata, the PDF's author field read D. Castellano. Created and last saved on August 24th at 11:52 at night. Piece 3. The money. The template cost $34.99, purchased August 24th with a Castellano contracting debit card, receipt emailed straight to Dominic's own inbox. Subpoenas are wonderful things. Piece 4. That robotic customer service line for Helix Origin. An internet phone number registered August 22nd, paid for with the same debit card. He hadn't just faked a document. He'd built an entire little theater set around it, box office included. And piece 5, my personal favorite, stapled to a subpoena return. The anonymous email to my commander had been sent through an account created that same week, from the same block of internet addresses as the Castellano contracting office. Every road on Prine's map led straight back to the same desk. So there it was, in exhibit form, not a husband deceived by some shady website, an author, a man who had typed his own son out of his blood on August 24th, ordered a prop swab kit on September 9th to wave at his uncles, and scheduled a firing squad for September 19th. Dated ambush, dated lie. Dated and paid for, weeks before he supposedly learned anything at all. Delacroix read all 43 pages twice, took off her glasses, and asked me the question the whole story had been marching toward. We can end his freedom, Renee, or end this war. Pick. I didn't pick that day. I picked the next morning at 6 a.m., over black coffee, the 1 hour I still trust my own head. Step 1 wasn't the district attorney. Step 1 was the very court that had been lied to. Delacroix drafted a motion for sanctions, fraud on the court, and attached everything. Prines 40, 3 pages, the template overlay, the metadata, the debit card trail, the tracking sheet showing the kit arriving 9 days after its own supposed results. Filing it meant standing up in public record and calling my husband a forger, in ink, under my own name. There would be no walking that back. No quiet reconciliation at Thanksgiving. No future where the Castellano family and I ever pretended at peace again. Delacroix made sure I understood that clearly. If any single piece of it wobbled, I'd become the vindictive military wife who cried forgery, and the town would finally get the ending it wanted. I read every page one more time, checked the exhibits against my own binder like I was inventorying a convoy manifest, and signed. My hand didn't shake, and I want you to know I checked. People talk. Paper doesn't lie for you. And now my paper outweighed his by 40, 3 pages and 1 delivery scan. That night, I did one more piece of filing. Private docket, judge of 1. I took off my wedding ring, wrapped it in a copy of the sanctions motion, sealed both in an envelope, and wrote the date on the outside like evidence, because that's exactly what it was. Evidence that I'd loved him, that it had been real on my side, and that it was closed now. I placed the envelope in the fireproof box next to my father's discharge papers. 2 quiet soldiers, 1 small tin. Then I slept, and I did not dream about the living room. A sanctions motion is a public document, and Belhaven reads its public documents the way other towns read a box score. Within a week, the story forked. Half the town held the line, "Poor Dominic, that woman again." But the other half had now read words like metadata and novelty certificate, and for entertainment purposes only, and you could feel the pews physically shifting weight. 2 clients pulled their contracts from Castellano Contracting, then a third. The quiet kind of verdict a working town hands down. I didn't gloat. I'd love to tell you I'm above it. The truth is I was simply too busy, and also my mother raised me to gloat privately into a dish towel. Thursday night, Nina called. She was crying before I even said hello. "The Easter thing," she said. "Mom's declaration. Renee, I was standing right there in the kitchen the entire time you were over. You talked about the ham and the baby's ear infection. That's all." She'd read the declaration language too, heard Fenwick's paralegal walk her mother through it. "Just sign it. It's a formality. It keeps the family safe." Formality. A sworn statement drafted by strangers, laid in front of a grieving, furious mother like a hymnal already opened to the right page. I asked Nina the only question that mattered. "Will you put what you just told me into an affidavit?" The line went so quiet I could hear her kitchen clock ticking. "He's my brother," she whispered. "And she's my mother." I told her I understood, and I did. I'd watched a family vote before, from the losing side of a feed store. I didn't push. "I've told you the ending already, so I'll just say it. Remember Nina." That Sunday, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize, and a voice like dry paper said, "This is Josephine Castellano. Come Tuesday. I make tea at 3. Josephine lived at the edge of town in the very first house the family ever owned. Small and square, black, and white photographs marching up the staircase wall. She was 86 and poured tea like a woman who'd outlived every argument in the county. I'll spare you my whole speech, because she cut it off a sentence in. "I know exactly what my grandson is," she said. "I've known since he sold his own dirt bike twice in one summer. Sit down." So I sat, and Josephine handed me the only inheritance she had to give away that afternoon, which was history. Long before I ever came along, there had been trouble in the family. Money trouble, her son's doing, back when Rosalind was a young wife new to the name. The details had sanded down over the years, the way Josephine told it, but the shape stayed clear. The family had needed someone to carry the shame quietly so the name could keep bidding on jobs. And everyone had looked at Rosalind, and Rosalind had signed exactly what she was asked to sign, and swallowed exactly what she was asked to swallow. She lost her election, Josephine said, stirring her tea, and she lived. And she made a religion out of it. "This family has been voting on the truth since before you were born, child. Somebody has to lose an election and keep living anyway." I asked if she'd say any of it in court. "No," she said, plain as weather. "I'm too old to switch teams in public." But I wanted you looking at the right target. It was never you they were voting against. It's what you never needed from them. I drove back to base with that sitting in my chest. My phone buzzed at a red light. Delacroix. They blinked. Settlement conference Friday. His side requested it. Thursday evening, the night before the conference, I stopped by the mediation building downtown to drop exhibit copies at Delacroix's office, and Dominic was waiting by the elevators like a coincidence in a good jacket. He'd lost some weight. His voice came out in the register he used to reserve for Sunday mornings and coffee. The register I'd actually married. Renee. 5 minutes. No lawyers. I should have kept walking. I gave him the 5 minutes because I wanted to watch the salesman work one more time. He offered me everything. The house. It was always more yours anyway, we both know that. The savings, repaid with interest. Miles, whatever schedule I wanted, he wouldn't fight it. All I had to do was withdraw the sanctions motion and let Prine's report disappear into a sealed settlement. One signature and everyone gets to heal. He said heal twice. And when I didn't answer, the register changed, and the real Dominic surfaced like a fin breaking water. You should think about what winning even gets you, he said. Gentle as a knife wrapped in a dish towel. Even if you take all of it, you'll still be the woman 26 people watch get thrown out of her own house. That's the version they'll tell at every table in this town forever. That never washes off, Renee. I made sure of that in one single night. You can't undo it in 100 court dates. Then the elevator arrived, and he stepped in and smiled at me until the doors closed, and I stood alone in that concrete lobby hating him with my entire rib cage, because the cruelest thing he'd said all year was also the one true sentence in it. I didn't sleep much that night, and my exhibits had nothing to do with it. I finally had to decide what winning actually meant. The settlement conference convened in a borrowed conference room with terrible coffee and a view of the courthouse flag. Fenwick came in gray-faced, flanked by a second attorney they'd brought in for the occasion, which told me everything I needed to know about how Prine's report had landed. Delacroix set her copy on the table like a place setting and gave me the War Council version one final time, low near my ear. Say the word and I walk this across the street to the district attorney. Forgery, fraud. He submitted a fabricated document to a judge, Renee. They take that very personally. You'd own the house, the settlement, likely the business too. By the time the dust settled, you'd own all of them. There it was, on a plate. Everything I'd wanted at 2 in the morning in my quarters. Every time I'd replayed Rosalind's arm pointing at that door. I asked for 10 minutes and stood in the hallway with Dana, who'd taken leave to sit in a plastic chair and be my spine that day. 2 futures side by side, like pages laid out on my kitchen table. Future 1, handcuffs, headlines, Castellano contracting a carcass, Rosalind ruined at 61, and Miles at 8, at 12. At 17, learning that the reason there's no father at his recital is that mom pushed, and the town retelling it forever with me cast as the woman who burned the family down. 18 more months of motions at minimum, with my son as the exhibit. Future 2 had only one thing in it, but I couldn't stop looking at it. A record, permanent, public, in his own voice. My father had kept boxes of receipts and never had anyone to read them into a record. I had both, and only one shot at choosing correctly. I walked back in. I have one offer, I said. It's not negotiable. I stayed standing because some things you deliver on your feet. Here are my terms, I said, looking at Fenwick, but speaking to the man beside him who hadn't met my eyes since the elevator. 1. Dominic appears at the final hearing, in open court, and reads a sworn admission into the record. That he fabricated the test, that he staged the 19th of September, that I never once betrayed him. His words. His voice. His name. On the transcript forever, too. I receive sole legal and physical custody of Miles. Dominic gets supervised visitation, with a path to more if he shows up and stays honest. He's still his son. The real lab said so, and he shouldn't have to pay for his father's character with his whole childhood. 3. The house is deeded to me alone and the $42,400 comes back, plus my legal fees, $17,800. 4. A notarized retraction goes to my commanding officer, correcting every word of the anonymous complaint. In exchange, I withdraw my request for a criminal referral. I won't ask the court to send this file across the street. The second attorney started whispering. Fenwick stared at me the way you'd stare at a hand grenade rolling to a stop with the pin still in. They had walked and braced for total war, and been handed surrender terms that let their client keep his freedom. And they couldn't find the trap, because the trap was never for them. Delacroix leaned in, her hand finding my wrist under the table. "You're giving up the kill shot," she murmured. "I know," I said. "I'm trading it for the record." She looked at me for a long second, the way Admiral Voss once looked at a manifest that finally balanced, and then she turned to Fenwick and started dictating deadlines. Dominic never said a word. He signed the term sheet like a man signing a listing agreement on a house he'd grown up in. The final hearing fell on a cold Thursday in December, and the Castellano family came to court the way they'd come to my living room. In force, in their church clothes, 26 strong. I recognized every single face from the 19th of September. Sal, the cousins, the neighbors from across the cull, Dee, Sack, Rosalind, front row behind her son, chin up, purse on her knees. The room even carried that same silence, scraped clean, waiting. There was one difference in the seating chart. Nina walked past her mother's row, past 30 years of assigned seating, and sat down directly behind me. Her affidavit had been filed 2 weeks earlier. The kitchen, the ham, the declaration that didn't sound like her mother, and now she sat at my back, where a witness belongs, hands folded, shaking slightly. Magnificent. The judge handled the divorce terms first, dry as inventory, custody as agreed, deed as agreed, restitution of $42,400 as agreed, fees as agreed. Then she said, "I understand there's a statement." And Dominic stood up. I watched a man who had never once, in 9 years, read from a script he didn't love, unfold a single sheet of paper with both hands to keep it from shaking. He read it flat and fast, like a hostage. But he read every single word. He had purchased a novelty certificate online on August 24th. He had entered the false result himself. He had arranged the gathering of September 19th for the purpose of confronting me publicly. The complaint to my command repeated claims he knew to be false, and then the sentence I'd built 4 months around, his voice finally cracking open in the middle of it. Renee Castellano never betrayed me. I fabricated the test. All of it. Somewhere behind me, Sal's wife made a sound like a hymnal dropping to the floor. Rosalind stood up in the middle of the sentence. Actually gathered her purse and walked out of the courtroom, her heels striking the floor like a clock being wound too tight. She did not look at me. The doors swung shut behind her. Her son kept reading to the room she'd left empty. The judge accepted the admission into the record, granted the sanctions motion, and said the words I'd traded my kill shot for. The court notes the petitioner's request, in the interest of the minor child, that no criminal referral be pursued. The court reserves its own discretion on that question. Reserves, meaning Dominic would spend a few years checking his mail carefully, which struck me as a fair tax on a man who'd once mailed my entire career a bomb. Outside on the courthouse steps, the town got to work metabolizing all of it. Most people were kind. A reporter from the county paper asked for a comment, and I declined politely twice. And then Mrs. Fontaine from the choir. A genuinely sweet woman, truly, who'd brought a casserole when Miles was born, took both my hands in hers and said, "I'm so glad it worked out, dear. Still, where there's smoke, you know." She patted my knuckles and walked off to lunch. There it was. The residue. The exact thing Dominic had promised me in that elevator lobby. The stain that 26 witnesses and a notarized retraction and a full court transcript cannot completely bleach out, because some people simply prefer the smell of smoke to the boredom of facts. I stood on those steps and let it hurt, and then I let it go. One breath in, one breath out, cheaper than a criminal trial, I told myself, and mostly meant it. That same afternoon, the service finished its own paperwork. Inquiry closed, unsubstantiated. Flag lifted. Retraction filed. And Admiral Voss called me personally, which admirals generally do not do, to congratulate you on a divorce. "Your packet's moving again, Lieutenant," she said. "Your name's in a good spot on the list. I need your answer on something within 72 hours. The second bill had arrived. What Voss had for me was the exact future I'd been running towards since I was 18. Command track, the schools that feed it, the assignments that prove it out, 2 years of moves and rotations, the on-ramp toward commander and beyond. 11 years of my life had been pointed at that offer like a compass needle. I asked for the 72 hours and spent them the honest way. Lists on the kitchen table. Miles asleep down the hall. The little lighthouse magnet, now holding up a photograph instead of an appointment card. Then I drove to sector headquarters and told a rear admiral no. I asked for the instructor billet instead. The logistics officer course at sector overlook. 3 years of stability. Home by 6 most nights. One address for Miles. An off-ramp from the fast track that most officers never take voluntarily. Voss heard me out with her hands flat on the desk, the same way she had the first time. You would have gotten it, she said. I know, I said. That's what makes it a real choice. She stood and walked to the window. And for once the woman dispensed something adjacent to sympathy. 24 years in, Lieutenant. And I'll tell you the only ledger that actually matters. It isn't the rank. It's the number of people who'd raise their right hand and swear for you, under oath, unpaid, on a random Thursday. Yours is full. I've seen full ones matter more than stars. In the end, that night, I finally understood the real difference between my father and me, and it isn't pride, and it isn't paper. He kept his receipts in boxes nobody ever opened, one man against a whole town, alone, on purpose. I let people read mine. A petty officer, a lawyer, an admiral, a sister-in-law with shaking hands. Proof isn't what saves you. Witnessed proof is, so I wrote it all down for the one witness who matters most. A letter to Miles, sealed, marked for his 18th birthday, with the transcript folded inside. Truth kept in a drawer, not nailed to a wall. The deed transfer recorded on a Tuesday in January, and Delacroix mailed me the keys in a padded envelope with a sticky note that read, "Go home." I drove the 90 minutes one more time, alone on purpose, and stood in the doorway where the whole war had started. The living room was empty. Dominic had taken the furniture. Fine. Let the man have his chairs. And without it, the room where 26 relatives once stood shoulder to shoulder turned out to be small, ordinary. Just a room with decent afternoon light, and a scuff on the floor where a coffee table had once caught a slammed folder. I walked through and opened everything, both living room windows, the kitchen window over the sink, the back door, the front door. Wide open until the January air walked through that house it was seriously thinking about buying. I stood in that cross breeze and heard it one more time, the way you test a bruise. Get out of my son's house, she'd screamed, her whole arm pointing at exactly where I was standing now. His house. It was never her house. It was never even really his. It was the house my deployments had paid for, the one my name had been on since the day I signed. And now the only name. The next weekend, Miles's crib went into the sunny bedroom, and Dana carried boxes and ate half the pizza, and my son slept his first night in a home nobody could stage a tribunal in, because his mother owns the door, and his mother decides who walks through it, and his mother leaves it open on purpose. The months since have been almost suspiciously quiet. The restitution cleared in 2 payments, right on schedule. $42,400, back where it started, plus the fees. Castellano Contracting is still standing, smaller now, run these days mostly by a cousin. Towns like Belhaven don't burn their old names down. They just stop saying them out loud quite so often. And honestly, that's about the right size of justice for this particular story. Dominic comes to his supervised Saturdays at the Family Visitation Center. Some weeks he's good with Miles. The Firefly song, the stuffed elephant. Some weeks he cancels with a contractor's apology. I write both kinds of Saturday down in a notebook, because I'm still my father's daughter. Just the revised edition. Rosalind sent a card on Miles's 2nd birthday, a bear holding balloons, glitter shedding everywhere. She signed it with one single letter. No message. And I understood it completely. It's as far as her religion allows her to travel, and the door she's standing behind is one she built with her own 2 hands. I wrote back, "Thank you." He loved the bear. Some elections you lose. Josephine taught me you can live anyway. Nina comes by most Sundays with banana bread and 0 apologies left to make. She made hers under oath, which is more than most people in this story ever managed. And in November, we finally threw the party we never got in September. Miles turned 2 in the backyard of the Belhaven house. Dana on cake duty. Delacroix in weekend clothes, which nobody there even knew she owned. Half the block invited. Admiral Voss stopping by for exactly 20 minutes in a golf shirt, to inspect the burgers and pronounce my logistics sound. 30, some people laughing in and out of my living room, and the front door propped wide open the entire afternoon with, "If you want to know, That same little lighthouse magnet. Holding the guest list to the refrigerator. Last September, a door opened behind me and saved my name because one friend walked through it right on time. Now I keep it open on purpose, and I watch who walks in, and every single one of them would raise their right hand for me on a Thursday. That's the fortune I carried out of the worst year of my life. The house came along with it. If this year taught me one thing worth engraving somewhere, it's this. A lie needs a full room to stay alive, but the truth only ever needs one witness, and a place where things get written down. So build your life somewhere things get written down, and never be too proud to hand somebody else the pen. That's my story, a text about a surprise, a folder slammed on a table, a sealed swab, and a door that opened at exactly the right moment. If someone is out there right now writing their version of events over your life, start keeping your own record today, and find your one witness. Share your story in the comments, I do read them. And subscribe to Quiet Reckonings, because next week, another door opens.